Hello and welcome. I'm Ana Amrein, and this is a new episode of Project Co by Efecto Colibrí, a podcast that explores mindsets and initiatives for positive change. We have honest conversations with social innovators and impact specialists. Our goal? To learn together how to create a more just and sustainable world for all. Join us in this journey. Inclusion starts with I. In today's episode, I have the pleasure of tackling the paramount topic of diversity in the workplace with Clara de Bienassis and Delia Mensitieri. Clara dedicated her career to working for NGOs in France and Ecuador, as well as for the French saving banks in philanthropy and corporate social responsibility. Clara is a partner at Stone Soup Consulting, an international consultancy that helps organizations and initiatives to achieve their greatest possible social impact. Stone Soup awarded the 4th edition of its Social Innovation Research Award to Delia's academic work, Inclusion Starts with I, reducing identity threat to promote an inclusive environment and to improve performance, career aspirations, and satisfaction. Delia is a corporate trainer and consultant on inclusion at the workplace and has worked with several international clients all over Europe. Delia is especially passionate about bridging the gap between science and practice. She believes that bridging the best of both worlds is the only way to create that inclusive workspace. Today we talk about inclusive organizations, the relationship between identity threat, the organization, and the experience of microaggressions, the effect of interventions, focus on reducing identity threat, and much more. Clara and Delia, thank you so much for being in Proyecto Co to discuss this super interesting and super important topic, which is the diversity in the workspace. Welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Anna.
I was thinking, Delia, because you're the expert of this panel in the topic of inclusion, and you've been studying and doing research on the question of inclusion begins with me. I find this approach very, very interesting because generally we tend to go into a lot of facts when we talk about inclusion, when we talk about diversity, when we talk about equity in the workspace. And you suddenly change the approach and start to talk about identity and about authenticity. Tell us more about this approach. Why did you decide to go about this way?
I think when organization and just in general, when people talk about diversity and inclusion, it's very much an abstract concept that people do not know how they can contribute. So they put the responsibility also, and rightfully so, to organization, to their manager. But by making inclusion a personal thing, by showing that every one of us can have a small part in this whole puzzle, we want to make it more tangible as well, so that people know if we want to work on inclusion, well, I know what I can do and what I can't do and how I can support people, and that the responsibility is a shared responsibility.
And I suppose that you as an individual also assume that responsibility, and that's why you're researching this topic. Because why were you interested in this topic?
I grew up in a very multicultural city, Brussels. So it's the capital of Europe. We have so many nationalities running on the streets, and you hear all these languages. And this never been a problem. And as soon as I entered organizations, it's then that I started realizing is that diversity is being seen as a problem and not as something, as a reality, as a fact, as something that can push your business forwards. And I actively started to support groups that were advocating for more women in tech or more ethnicity in tech. And it's then when I realized, well, it's not so easy. Where do you start? How do you make sure that people who already work in your organizations do not feel excluded? I mean, imagine you're working already for 20 years in the same way, and then you have someone who says, well, actually, how you're working, you're excluding people. That's not a nice thing to hear. So that's why I started thinking, well, I think we need to have a very practical research to understand better what works, what doesn't work, how can we make everyone included, how can we get everyone on board on this topic so we can stop making diversity an issue, but just embracing it from the start.
When you face a challenge in your own skin, then you make it like your mission to accomplish a solution. So congratulations. And before we go deeper into your research, which I'm very excited about, I would like to know from your point of view, Clara, as the co-founder of Stone Soup, which is an organization that I know very well and I really, really admire. And I believe it's also very diverse, given also the quantity of projects that you work with. I was wondering, why was this a topic?
Stone Soup, since it was created 14 years ago, almost 14 years ago, we place social responsibility at the very heart of the company. And a few years ago, we certified as a B Corp corporation, and we have a fund dedicated to support research initiatives. So because we think that research is really important for the work we do as consultants. And for this fourth award this year, we thought that it was the moment to dedicate it to diversity and inclusion, not only because the subject in general was interesting, but also because we really need diversity in the world and in the work we do as Stone Soup. Well, in Stone Soup, we work with a community of about 50 consultants that are based all around the world and with different cultural backgrounds. And we also have clients from all over the world of different types. We can work with foundations, NGOs, and companies. So diversity is in Stone Soup every day. So that's why the subject was so important for us. And that's why we decided to specify on it this year.
Also out of a personal or organizational necessity, no? That's interesting. That's interesting. And congratulations that you're doing so, because there are not so many organizations giving awards to research on the one hand and to diversity and inclusion on the other hand. Actually, I've never heard of any other organization, at least in Spain, that does so, no? So congratulations for being so pioneer.
Thank you. Thank you. But as I said before, diversity and inclusion is really important for us. And we have some important corporate documents. We have a policy on diversity and inclusion. We have a Stone Soup code of ethic. So for us, it's really important. It's not something that we say and something that we sign. No, it's really something that we apply in our day-to-day work.
And Clara, because in Stone Soup, you are a couple of co-founders, but all of you are female, no?
Yes, we are all female.
Yeah. And if you started 14 years ago, that's already something, no?
Yeah. That's it.
The situation was different. Delia, so let's go. Let's start. I'm looking very much forward to first hearing about the challenges that we face as organizations such as Stone Soup, such as Efecto Colibrí, such as many others that are trying to do a positive impact. What do we face? Which are the challenges that we face when trying to create inclusive and diverse and authentic workspaces?
Well, I think it's the same challenges that you would face before every big change, basically. On top of that, it is also very personal and subjective feeling and topic. So there's a lot of feelings and everyone has an idea about diversity and inclusion. So it's quite complex if you want to start with it. But if I'm just thinking about the organizations that I've spoken to, we see a couple of main challenges. So the first one is very easy, is to get everyone on board. It's something that we see is that it comes from HR or it comes from someone in the business who says, well, I think we need to work on diversity and inclusion. And then what? Then it's all about convincing people basically why it's an important project, why it's an important topic to focus on. And then I think that's the first big and maybe biggest hurdle, is to get everyone on board. When I'm saying everyone, it's senior management. You need sponsors as well for the projects. You need to get budget. You need to get people hired. So it's not as easy as that to get everyone on board on this topic.
Why isn't it obvious that it's an important topic?
I think there are a couple of main reasons. So first of all is that a lot of organizations do not see an issue. They say we are already doing well, and we received the comments of, well, we are trying, and it's just that diverse talents do not find us, or they do not apply for these kind of jobs, or well, for management positions, well, it's just, again, the possibilities are there, but it's just people not taking them. So it takes a lot of guts, and it takes a lot of courage, basically, to admit that there is something wrong. That how your organization might be structured, that it might impede certain profiles, certain groups to actually get hired, to actually get promotions. So I think that's already a very difficult one, is people need to have that courage, that guts to look inside themselves and see, okay, well, actually, our structures, our policies, we might think that they're being transparent. We might think that they're actually being equal and just, but maybe in reality, they're not being fair. And that is already a very difficult one. Another thing is also fear. I think we all have heard it. It's about, well, this is positive discrimination. As soon as if we have quotas, for instance, or as soon as people say, well, we need to have certain numbers or certain objectives, is that organizations then say, well, no, it's not fair. We're being discriminated. You're also, when you see about trainings, why do they get trainings? Why don't we get trainings? So you also see that, in a sense, a lot of resistance, because some people believe that then they will not get the chance to move forward.
So it would require basically a lot of therapy and a lot of coaching, so that most people in organizations would have the capacity to be vulnerable and look inward and see the gaps, admit those things that are not going well.
Indeed, I think the self-awareness is super important, that you know yourself and that you have that openness of mind. And also the framing should be different when we speak about diversity and inclusion. Now the framing is most of the time as something, as a challenge, as a problem, instead of saying, well, this is something that could benefit us all. If we have a diverse team, well, we see that people are happier, that their well-being increases. So it's about me being happy, it's about you being happy, so it's about us being happy. And I think that common ground, finding that common ground, finding that, making sure that everyone feels home, is something that everyone needs to work on. But that's a rhetoric that we do not see at the moment. Most of the time is just seen as something, an issue, because we need to work on it for our investors or for the public, but not as something as it's good for the whole company.
Clara, in your opinion, and having been doing consultancies for so many organizations that work for social impact, do you see that most organizations are going in the direction of diversity? Are they embracing this as a challenge, or isn't it a topic on the table?
Well, I think it is a very hot topic, and above all, because now with such a global world, and also because of the pandemic, and now that you can work for an organization that is based at the other point of the world, I think diversity is very important. So all organizations have to be really open-minded, and also as the world is evolving so fast, it's really something important. But maybe organizations don't know exactly how to work in a diverse in such a diverse place. So that's why a work such as the one Delia does is so important, because I think it can teach us so many good practices, so many specific tools about what works in organizations and what doesn't work. So yeah, I think it's really the moment to work on that.
Delia, so back to you. Given what Clara has been saying, which are like what would you recommend us to start moving and going into that direction? Which are the tools and then best practices that you could share with us?
I think it's, first of all, start with the why, and clearly define the why. Why do you as an organization want to work on diversity and inclusion? And it can be a couple of reasons. I mean, it can be the reason that you say it corresponds with our values that we have as an organization, or we want to, we think it's important to stay competitive in a global market. We want to tailor our products. So the why can be very, very open. And I think that's the first step. A second step is then that you start scoping. Otherwise, diversity and inclusion can be it goes very broad. I mean, if we just look, what is diversity? Diversity is about things that we can see. It can be about my gender. It can be about my ethnicity. It can be about my hair color. It can also be about things that we do not see. It can be if I have kids, yes or no. It can be my personality, but also my preferences for food or my preferences to work at home, not at home. So it goes extremely broad. So the first thing that I always say is scope it down, make it easy, make it tangible. Don't take huge steps, and define smaller actions. Think about what you can do as an organization. You can also just say, okay, what kind of leaders should we need here? So think about it as a project and scope it down. A third thing that you then need to do is to start measuring your successes, start measuring your failures, but so that you know, and that you know as well in what kind of direction you need to go. When you measure, very importantly, do not only measure diversity numbers. It's about the percentages, so what is the proportion of women working here? What is the balance of age? While these percentages are very important, it can lead to polarizing discussions. But if you link your measurements to the why, so for instance, you could say we want to hire more talents, we want to, we want more innovation, more creativity, then it's easier. And listen as well to the stories of your people. Go out there and talk to them, because what you will see reflected in a number might not correspond with the stories, with the experiences. So based on your measurements and your definitions, I think, and you can already start defining some actions, but you first need to know why you're doing it, what it actually means, and what's happening. Otherwise, if you just start, it's going to be a waste of money and a waste of time.
I was thinking, Delia, now in order to go deeper and make it more concrete, if I think about my why, could it be, for instance, to increase well-being in the workspace, because people that are well are going to work better, be more creative, more productive, and happier, basically. Would that be enough, or should I go even deeper?
No, that's already a very good start. You could just say increased well-being. You can define a little bit, okay, what does well-being mean to us? But you can just see from there. So for me, that's already a very good start.
And then if I go into the actions, that's where my problem comes. What could it be? Or should I go first to how I'm going to measure it?
Well, your actions and measurements, they go hand in hand. So let's take these two together. And so both when you measure and both when you define actions, you need to look at inclusion from different levels. So you need to define actions and you need to define measurements on what am I doing as an organization? So it can be about your recruitment processes, it can be about your decision-making processes. So that's something what you're doing as an organization. There's already should be some actions there. A second level of actions and measurement should be on the level of your leadership. How How do I feel that my leader respects my opinion? How well does my leader integrate different opinions? These are things that you also should need to measure and that you also need to define some certain actions on. Why? Because research has shown that leaders, moreover, middle managers actually have a huge role to play in inclusion. Actually, they're one of the key factors to make inclusion work. So that's something that you already could work on in how can we create inclusive leaders? How can we have a leadership team or a pipeline of leadership teams that could be open for inclusion? So that's a different mindset. And then lastly, you also need to think about actions on behaviors. What can people do? What can't they do? What kind of actions, what kind of behaviors would you like to promote as an organization? What kind of behaviors do you want to discourage? So that goes very much into the details of the interactions between people. But you need to have these different levels in your action plan because they're all interconnected. It's not that you need to focus on all of three from the beginning, but just keep them in mind that inclusion is on different levels. It's about what you do as an organization. It's how inclusive your leaderships are. And lastly, it's also about the interaction between people. How will you improve those interactions?
How was the process of doing the research? What kind of answers did you get from the organizations? Were they ready, or what were your main insights?
I think the main insights that we have at the moment is that inclusion is a multi-level concept, and that in the end, inclusion is something very individual. It's something very personal. It's about me, Delia, feeling that I am part of my team, that I'm being appreciated for who I am, that I can bring all my strengths, my cultural backgrounds, and that I will be encouraged to do so. And that's a very individual and psychological feeling almost. It's about a balance actually between feeling that you belong in your team, in your organization, and the feeling that you can bring your authentic self. And as long as that feeling is not there, well, all the beautiful practices and strategies, you might have the greatest leadership team, but if that feeling is not there, people will not rate your organization as being inclusive. We actually can't say that you're being an inclusive organization.
Because I think that's super interesting. No, I was talking last week to a friend of mine. She works at a big corporation in Berlin. She works in personal and professional development department because I don't want to use the human resources concept. And she was saying, hey, nowadays it's super difficult because I basically can't say anything because I have to be so careful not to be exclusive of any element of any individual working in this project. And imagine there are 300 people working there and they're all very diverse, but it also becomes kind of difficult. So how can we manage this?
I think it all depends as well on how much psychological safety there is in your organization. So how safe do people feel? But from all sides. Because we could say that your friend is also not feeling safe. So I think that is something that we need to keep in mind. We need to create a safe environment in organizations where, okay, you can make a remark, but then you should be also fine when someone says, well, I don't think that this remark is being so okay, but that you can learn. That you can create that space of someone says something, someone replies, and that you know it will always happen in safety. That you can make a joke, for instance, but if someone doesn't like your joke, then it's fine as well. That you do not need to take it personally, that you see it as a learning point. And also, I think we need to be a little bit careful sometimes that how should I say this? That we create unsafe environments where people do not dare to say something, where people do not dare, for instance, to say, well, we're going for lunch. Can I invite this person? Yes or no? Maybe with all the food restrictions. Just ask. I think that's important. Otherwise, we create a world where people are scared to interact because they're scared to offend people. And I think that's the wrong way to go, because that's not inclusion.
Clara, what do you think about what Delia is telling us?
And I was taking notes while she was speaking, because I really like what she says about that inclusion is at different levels. And we see it in our work at Stone Soup, because as I said before, we have a community of 50 consultants, which are very, very diverse. So we have to apply inclusion in the way we work with our consultants, but also with our clients, which are also very diverse. They can be based in different countries of the world and can be of different types. But I think it's important to find a common denominator, because there is always one. And also to create a safe environment. I really like what she says, what Delia says about that. And to be open and leave always space for debate, because I think it's important that people know they can share, they can discuss everything. And if it's not possible, there is really a problem. If people cannot express their feelings, there is really a problem in the organization. So yeah, thank you, Delia, for sharing your thoughts about it.
We work in Efecto Colibrí with many social entrepreneurs, no, and they're based in different parts of the world. And our team in Efecto Colibrí is mainly from Latin America and Europe, no, in Europe with a focus in Spain and the UK. And there we do have a little bit of diversity, but 90% of us are women, and we're all white. So that's like, I'm thinking it's not diverse enough. Or where do we start thinking or saying it's diverse?
I do not like to talk in terms of numbers and percentages, because then you get your question, Anna. When is it enough? When are we on the right track? I'm very realistic in that sense, that I always say your organization needs to be a reflection of society. And as an organization, it's very hard to influence certain societal evolutions or constructs, or how you want to call it. You can play a role, but it's not as easy. What I want to say with this is, I'm just going to make it very concrete. At least here in Belgium, if you want to work in care, well, you will find a lot of women. You will not find a lot of men. If you have an engineering firm, at least again here in Belgium, you will have a lot of male engineers, not a lot of women engineers. How can you then get to 50-50 if there is only 10% every year of women that graduate with an engineering degree? That's very hard. That's almost impossible. What you can do as an organization is to strive to get that 10%, to get them in, to have that 10% also there in leadership positions. You can do more, of course. I have a beautiful organization, and what they've done is they are, it's a large corporation, and what they have, they work in a construction. So of course, construction, it's a very male-dominated world. But what they've done is that they've created academies for girls. So they invested already up front in getting a more female pipeline of girls that want to go into construction, without any guarantees that they would end up working for them. They just said, well, we have an active role to play. We will make sure that the pipeline where we can recruit from will be more diverse. So that's something that they do. I prefer to have this kind of mindset than thinking, when is an organization diverse? Because that's a very difficult question. Where do you draw the line? What is a good percentage? There are at the moment no guidelines basically to tell you what are good percentages, what are good numbers, what are good quotas. I think it's a decision that you as an organization need to think about, to say, again, the why. Why do you want to attract? Why do you want to become more diverse? And I think that's the most important thing. If you say because we believe it's a good thing, well, I think all the steps that you've already taken, these are already good steps. Be proud of them. Instead of ending up in the numbers discussion. They are important, especially for larger organizations. For smaller ones, they're a bit hard. I would rather have a more strategic conversations than just a conversation about numbers. But I don't know if that answers your question, Anna.
Yes, it does. It does. And it gives me peace of mind. So thank you. No, really, yes. And I believe it is the right way to go about it, because at the end, we have been reacting to the people that come to us instead of going to look for the diverse profile. So it was more of a pull strategy regarding the team, the motivations and the values than a push strategy, no? So that's how it evolved in the direction that it did. But you give me more peace, now saying that don't be obsessed with the numbers, no, and with the quotas. Because then when we say that diversity and inclusion improves the well-being of the people at work, and the creativity and so on, because there are a couple of indicators that prove that, no? Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So maybe a little nuance here. So just bringing people of different backgrounds together, well, that doesn't work. And I think that's obvious. If you just put people together with different backgrounds, different ideas about life, well, what you get is people get into conflict, of course, which is obvious. Nobody wants to be heard that they are being wrong or that someone has a completely different opinion. But what they do find is as soon as diversity is being managed, as people have a common goal, a common purpose, then all the benefits arise. Then you can actually have increases in well-being, a decrease in absenteeism and people not showing up to work, an increase in innovation and performance. But you need to have inclusion. You can't just throw people together. So that's why it's so important not only to focus on those numbers, but you need to have that culture. You need to have that safe space where people feel free and safe and appreciated for sharing their ideas. People need to have that common ground, that common purpose, because otherwise you have people working in all directions. You want people to work in the same direction, but with different ideas. And only then, when you have safe space, you have a common ground, you have people with an open mindset, then all the benefits of diversity can come. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard, and you can actually have a decrease in well-being and decrease in creativity, basically, and all the other benefits that we just summed up.
And I was wondering, Delia, is this topic a topic of the West, or is it something that we see all over the globe? What do you think?
It's very much a Western subject. There is research now coming from China and from India, and the researchers, rightfully so, say indeed that diversity and inclusion, how it's being studied now and how it's being implemented now, are from a very Western perspective. So there are now academics and scientists from there who are looking at how can we define and create inclusion here in the Eastern world. Of course, inclusion and diversity is a very big topic as well in South Africa, given as well their whole history with the apartheid and the issues that are still running there. I think most of the research is being done in South Africa, the States, and the UK. Even just in Europe, there is not a lot of research on diversity and inclusion here on mainland Europe.
And which are the next steps then? You said there's still a way to go in your research. What can we expect?
So the next step, actually, it's uncovering inclusive and non-inclusive behaviors. So what we've done now is to see, okay, what can you do as an organization? What kind of leadership do you need? But now we go into actually finding out what kind of behaviors are okay and we should encourage, and what kind of behaviors are not. So that next time if you talk to your friend, for her it's more clear what she can do and what she can't do. What kind of remarks are okay, what kind of remarks should not be okay. Also to show the impact of certain remarks, because that's something that we still see, that there needs to be still awareness that a simple remark or a simple joke if you hear them every day, they're not funny anymore. And they have actually a huge impact. So studies from the States, they have indicated that people who encounter on a daily basis non-inclusive behaviors, that the impact is actually higher than open and blatant racism and sexism. So I think that's huge. That's something, a small remarks that you hear every day, they have bigger impact on your mental well-being than these very open and sexist remarks. That's for me something that I'm still baffled, and that's something that we want to see if that's as well here in Europe.
I think that's super, super, super important. And it's going to be very practical, because like that, we really understand how important it is, the way that we communicate on a daily basis. Because it's true, if I remember, because I used to be like the black sheep, and they used to tell me the crazy one. And at the end, I believed that. And that had a huge impact, and I had to go through a whole process of deconstructing that construction that had been nurtured for such a long time. So I think that's where you're heading at. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the best example that I've heard. It's basically the people that you care about actually say these kind of things, and after a while, you just assume that it's true.
Totally, yeah.
And that's very, that's mentally very hard. How will you cope with this?
Yeah, totally. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Delia, for everything that you have shared here with us, and for all the work that you're doing to help us all as a human collective to create better spaces, more inclusive spaces and safe spaces that help us be more authentic.
Well, I think that's why it's important to have these conversations so that we can all learn and share from each other. Because there is at the moment not a recipe that actually works. So we need to talk and inspire each other to find out together what works.
Clara, do you have any additional question for Delia?
I think it's quite clear, but I really look forward to reading the main conclusions of our research. Because I think it will be very inspiring for Stone Soup, and also for our community of clients that all are linked in a way with diversity and inclusion, or should be linked, or should work more on that topic. So I really look forward to reading them. So hopefully in some months, right, Delia?
Fingers crossed, indeed.
Thank you so much, Clara and Delia, for being on board with Proyecto Co. It was a great pleasure. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. You can find all the references of the episode on our website, www.efectocolibri.com/proyectoco. If you liked it, rate us with 5 stars, leave us a comment, and share it with your network. This will help us reach more people and make social innovation become the norm. So in advance, a big thank you. If you have questions, feedback, or want to introduce us to a guest for the podcast, you can write us directly at ana@efectocolibri.com. See you next time.